Hello and welcome to On Air, brought to you by Altitude Angel. I'm Stephen Farmer, Head of Corporate Communications and PR, and I'm joined once again by Phil Binks, our Head of ATM. Binksy, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Very well, thank you, mate. Very well. Good to see you again.
Yeah. What about this? New
setup, new stools, mate.
I'm scared of heights.
Well, being so small, I do feel for you there. So, Binksy, we're just going to have a little catch up on the perennial question of airspace. What is it? Who flies in it? What can we do with it? Wow. So I've just got sort of 4 little questions that we're just going to run through. Hopefully it won't take very long. But the first one is, who actually owns airspace?
Who owns the airspace? Well, it's sovereign airspace, isn't it? The country, it's there for the country. The state own the airspace. And through the Department for Transport and the CAA, they're the ones. So the Department of Transport obviously it comes under their authority, the airspace does, and they delegate that authority to the CAA and say, CAA, can you make sure our airspace stays safe? And draw up the necessary legislation and regulations in order to keep our airspace safe. So they're the real practical ones. They are the professionals at managing and running the airspace. Okay.
So that's actually nicely onto my second question. So obviously airspace across the UK. So who actually manages the airspace? And not all airspace is managed.
Correct. Yeah, very, very good question. So we hear NATS manages the airspace. They are the main ANSP, Air Navigation Service Provider in the UK. They effectively provide the en route services. So that's their license. So that is what we call NERL, part of NATS. It's the regulated side of the business. So if you go on holiday in an airliner, the airline has to pay through route charges. They pay NATS to provide air traffic control services to manage these en route services, the airways in the sky, the motorways in the sky. However,
right, go on.
They are not the only air navigation service provider in the UK. I think in the UK, there are about 65 air navigation service providers. So they have been delegated, be given the authority by the CAA to manage a block of airspace.
Right. Wait one sec. Right. So let's just wind this back a little bit. So you've got the likes of NATS. There's certain areas of NATS that manage airspace relatively low level.
Yeah, all the way down. If they're providing services at an airport, for example, Heathrow, they manage that airspace
all the way down to the ground. But then there's also the wider sort of the bigger part of NATS, which doesn't really concern what we do here at Altitude Angel, and that's en route, which is basically once you get out of Heathrow, you get passed to the NATS en route services, and they will then pass you to French air traffic control, assuming they're not on strike, and then they get you over France and into Spain, assuming they're not on strike. They'll land you in Marbella.
Absolutely,
right.
Absolutely.
But for us for drone operations, so sort of sub 400 feet, we're more likely to be concerned with.
Airports,
airports. Airfields.
So as we know, licensed airfields have an FRZ, flight restriction zones, and you're not allowed to operate your drone within that flight restriction zone unless you have approval from that airport, air traffic services, and so on and so forth like that.
Right.
So that's why that is clearly defined on Drone Safety Map and Drone Assist and all those other applications.
Which is very neatly unrehearsed as well. So this is my third question. So who do you need to get permission off? So I guess in some airspace, if you go into Drone Safety Map or Drone Assist, and you go where you live, and there's no colour, as it were, over your house. There's no yellow, there's no red.
No airspace restriction whatsoever.
So I can fly my drone.
You can.
All is well, and happy days.
Well, that's the whole purpose, isn't it, of Drone Assist and all those apps. The whole purpose, many, many years ago, with NATS, they wanted to set up an app so people could know where they could, or more importantly, should not operate their drone. So we have those yellow areas, we have those red areas.
To clarify, not so much not operate, but request permission.
Correct. Yeah.
So I guess permissioning is probably one of the more important sides of it. So if it's a red zone around an FRZ, you need permission.
Correct. Absolutely. So you should not be operating the drone until you have approval to to operate the drone within that airspace.
Right. And but what we call Class G airspace,
Yeah,
which
bandit
is
country, open FIR,
yeah,
do what you want.
do what you want
Nobody's effectively
within the
managing
law.
that airspace.
Just to clarify, within the law.
I suppose that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Nobody's managing that airspace.
Yeah.
So even if you're a GA pilot or a drone operator or anything along those lines, you can get airborne and you can just fly around to your heart's content.
Yeah.
You can request services. So you do have a thing called LARS, Low Airspace Radar Services, often provided by the military, and also some other airfields like Farnborough do a LARS service. And you can ask for, if you're in a GA aircraft, a radar service. But they're not effectively managing the airspace. They're just going to provide you with a service to help you maintain safe flight.
Right. Brilliant. And finally,
actually, can I just add one more thing to that, though?
Yes.
This is why I think it's really, really important for. We always talk about integration of uncrewed and crewed aviation. This is why I think it's really, really important, and I'd love to get every drone operator into the habit of submitting a flight plan, whether they are in an restricted airspace or this open FIR bandit country. Because if you start submitting a flight plan, that information can be shared through numerous platforms, and people have a greater understanding of what is happening in that airspace, whether in open FIR, Class G airspace, or in restricted airspace. And therefore, the airspace can be managed far, far better, or people can understand what's going on in the airspace, and therefore improve safety.
Yeah. As someone who lives near numerous RAF bases, we often get military flying over, and I do question whether they are sub 400 feet sometimes.
Which they're allowed to be, of course.
Yeah, because my windows do rattle.
Yeah, so low-level flying in the UK is a standard level flying for fixed-wing aircraft is 250 feet. And for rotary helicopters is 150 feet. And in certain areas of the UK, they can go even lower than that. So that is perfectly acceptable to get aircraft operating at that level.
In Class G airspace. So
Exactly
they're totally, they're legally flying, you're legally flying. Yeah. But I know the RAF are actually beginning to now look at drone safety map and drone assist when they're plotting some of their flights, because they want to see if there's going to be a scheduled drone operation.
Exactly that. If we can start sharing that data and we can promulgate to the RAF through whatever platform they want, we can start sharing and they can understand where these operations take place. Yeah.
Brilliant. And finally, mate, atypical airspace. This is something that seems to be talked about more and more.
Yeah.
What is atypical airspace and who can fly in there?
It came a couple of months ago where the Civil Aviation Authority have said atypical airspace could be, for an example, a power line. And a power line, therefore, is crewed aviation is not going to fly near a power line. There's inherent dangers of flying quite close to a power line. However, therefore, can a drone operate quite close to that power line, knowing they shouldn't be coming into direct conflict with crewed aviation, because crewed aviation won't be playing next to that power line, and therefore there's an element of safety there, there's an element of protection for that uncrewed aircraft operating. So they're calling that something like atypical airspace. There's an element, by the very nature of the instruction, there's an element of improved safety or increased safety for a drone operation to take place. And that's what they're talking about there. How would that play out? And looking at what we call atypical airspace.
Okay.
It's effectively flexible use of airspace. Why wouldn't we start exploring that? Why wouldn't we do that? I think that's a very, very good idea.
Good stuff. So Binks, thank you once again for being on air.
Good to speak to you.
Good to see everybody out there. And yeah, we'll see you next time on air with Altitude Angel. Thanks for joining us.